Welcome to The Right Chamber, the podcast that takes you inside the NHS to explore what really makes a hospital a hospital.
Each episode, we sit down with the people who keep healthcare moving, from doctors, nurses on the front line, to students, the support teams, administrators, corporate staff, and everyone in between. These are the voices that often go unheard, but together they form the heartbeat of our hospitals.
Our aim is simple: to share authentic stories that are accessible to the public, meaningful to NHS staff, and a reminder that healthcare is more than treatments and wards. It's a whole community working together.
So whether you're part of the NHS family or simply curious about the people behind the service, join us as we open the doors to the conversations that matter here in the Right Chamber. Helen Board joined the Dudley Group in 2009 as a project officer with a strong interest in governance. She has served as Trust Board Secretary since November 2022, working closely with the Chief Executive and Chair to uphold effective board governance. Helen is a committed advocate for the Trust's training and development opportunities and the excellent care progression they support.
Dan Conway joined Sandwell and West Birmingham NHS Trust in 2021 as Associate Director of Corporate Governance Company Secretary, having previously held the same role at Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust. He has played a key role in strengthening governance arrangements to support the opening of Midland Metropolitan University Hospital and the transition to a group structure, and is a strong advocate for clear governance frameworks that enable effective board decision-making.
Hello and welcome to the Right Chamber podcast. I'm Jaspreet.
And I'm Victor.
In this episode, we explore corporate governance in the NHS and how it helps one of the world's largest healthcare systems run effectively.
In today's episode, we're focusing on the people working behind the scenes, the teams responsible for budget, finance, and compliance that keep the NHS organisations accountable.
We'll break down how governance supports decision-making and ensures public resources are used responsibly.
Let's get started.
And today we've got two lovely guests and we'll let them do their introductions. Helen first.
Thank you very much. My name's Helen Board and I'm Board Secretary at the Dudley Group.
Hi, I'm Dan Conway. I'm the Company Secretary / Associate Director of Corporate Governance at Sandwell NHS Trust.
Okay, so before we get into everything, could you explain your roles to start off with? What do you do in the NHS?
Yeah, absolutely. We are looking after the corporate governance of an organisation, and that's got quite a lot of different facets. But in summary, it's really about ensuring that we comply with what we need to comply with. We're a highly regulated industry.
Yeah, so I think if you spoke to the chair, he'd say it's your job to keep me safe, and that's what we do. We, as Helen says, lots of regulatory and lots of frameworks that we have to keep on top of. We're expected to know when changes happen, when returns have to be made, and to make sure that the trust board is compliant when they meet and make decisions that they're allowed to make and not outside their remit.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's a lot of work. So what got you guys into this? Like something must have motivated you into
Why governance?
doing so much work to make sure that we're all doing the right thing for the community.
My personal experience, I'd never planned to do this. Yeah. I was looking for a career change, and I was going to go back to university as a mature student was the original plan, but I had 6 months before that started, and a friend of mine worked at Birmingham Mental Health Trust, and he offered me he says, "You'll come and work." He said, "You can work for me for 6 months on the mental health." When he was a band 3 on the wards in there, and just fell in love really with the NHS, and then sort of was interested in what was to offer. I was doing compliance work in a different industry before this. I've come from a little bit of that governance sort of stuff, and then I managed to get us a comment within clinical governance. And 18 months later, a comment came up as a board clerk, which is usually, we don't have one in our organisations here, but it's someone that supports the company secretary. I enjoyed that, and I thought, well, they offered to support me to study my ICSA exam. I managed to do that, and then became the company secretary of that organisation, and then came to here. So there wasn't a plan to be where I'm at.
It is very nice to hear that you fell in love with the NHS.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
And that made you think like, actually, what can I do to like make things better?
Yeah.
That is very encouraging. Like very
and I think a big event. I've worked on the ward, so I've worked ward to ward, so I've seen the challenges that have come from there, and it is challenging on the wards, and I do have some empathy towards that, and I think that can help you be grounded because it is easy to think, well, those guys up in the ivory tower don't know what's happening down here, but we try and support the board with the board. We try and make sure they get their visits, and again, that's something that fits into our program to make sure that the board do understand what's going on the front line and go and actually see that lived experience. Yeah, that was how I got into.
Wow, I never actually knew that, but there you go. My story probably on introduction to NHS was probably a little bit different. I'd spent 15 years working in voice and data solutions. I'd done account management, I'd done project management. So I like to have things organised, I suppose is the best way. And I was unfortunately made redundant, which was a shame. But that was part of the credit crunch, was it, in 2008? And I was out there. I mean, I'd worked in international companies, small, medium enterprise. I've been self-employed before. So I've seen a lot of commerce is the right word. And that sort of business in the tech sector. And a similar thing, a friend said to me, given the skill set that you've got, she was working as an organisational development lead at a neighbouring trust. She said, I really think, the NHS would be a really good fit for you. And I was like, really? That deals with sick people, And that was looking back, that was a terrible thing to think. But fundamentally, they were looking for a project officer. So I also came here on a temporary contract on a band 4. And at that point, it was set within the communications and engagement team. So I had quite a few years working with stakeholder management, looking after the Council of Governors. And I very, very quickly realised that I was really at home here. I felt there was a real purpose and value to the work that I did, because fundamentally there are patients at the end of this who are our friends, our family, our loved ones, and all of that. And that was where my value set probably kicked in, and I thought, right. And after a few months, I was made substantive, which was fantastic news. And then I think this is now my 5th job, but like yourself, I also did some formal studies while I was working. Similar to yourself again, I was made deputy to the director of governance at that time, and then ultimately made board secretary. But I think, I would say my overriding sort of ethos about coming to work is supporting people to be the best they can be. Absolutely, every day. And I think it's a valid point to make that there's huge opportunities that can be offered to people. In my time here, I've got personal experience of apprentices coming fresh out of college and getting a start in the NHS. And I'm still working with 5 of them to this day, and they're all done really well. And that's in a non-clinical role. And I think often non-clinical roles are underplayed in the NHS, but there's a real opportunity to, make a career and become what you really want to be. So I've got, a huge amount of gratitude for the opportunities that I've had. And obviously work with amazing people. I don't want to go so slushy and say it's like a family, but it becomes that.
But I love that you guys were temporarily in and it just sat you in. It's like,
yeah, there's no escape, is there?
Yeah, but you can see the commonality there is that just falling in love with the NHS, falling in love with wanting to do the best for your local community and the people there, and wanting your staff as well to be the best that they can be. And you can see how that motivation can just grow into something so beautiful.
It's nice to know that like you actually love your job. So that's nice. It's very, very motivating. And we always drill this into everyone that there are jobs in the NHS that don't require you to be like a doctor or a nurse. So this is a step forward.
Yeah, this is another part of the puzzle of
Yeah.
what makes a hospital a hospital. You know, that part that, that you might not see on walking through hospital doors, but there's a whole lot going
Behind
on.
the scenes.
I think people see the NHS logo, don't they? Our blue lozenge, I think, is the correct term for it. And they think, oh, it's doctors and nurses. But actually, when we look at the Dudley Group and when we look at Sandwell, NHS Trust, it's not the hospitals, it's the community care,
Yeah.
it's the outreach, it's the integration work we do with the wider health economy and third sector. It's the the relationships we build with our local authority who are sort of in charge of sort of the social care portfolio, and we all need to work together. So I think there's quite an education piece, not just for the people who work in the NHS, because it's easy just to be, you go in, you've got your day job and you're really busy and committed, but to understand there's a much wider sort of remit to how we all come together to deliver what we need to.
When a random person on the street, they hear the word corporate governance, it can be quite difficult to get your head around.
When they think corporate, they think like big companies. I don't think people understand that NHS is a
Kind of a
company.
big company.
Kind of a company. So how would you explain it to a random person walking down the street in Dudley?
I've actually been asked this question at a dinner party, and I think in summary, it's about making sure that we do the right things in the right way, in a consistent way. So we're highly regulated. We have many masters, notwithstanding the Secretary of State for Health. We report as a foundation trust directly to that Secretary of State for Health. And our board are accountable for the use of public funds. Between Sandwell and Dudley, we are allocated a budget that runs well over £1 billion, and we're servicing populations, of 2 million, something like that, across the patch. So it's quite an undertaking. So, when you look at one of the main roles of the board, it is about setting the strategic direction of the trust within the confines of what the government are asking us to do. But it's a strategy that's designed for the delivery for our people in our area, making best use of the resources we've got. So if we're looking at our clinical colleagues, it's how best can we, say, create centres of excellence or reduce duplication, reduce variability. So already you see I'm straying into the practical applications about what we do. But underlying all of that is a foundation or framework that you would class as corporate governance.
I think our own partners would probably say that they don't understand fully what we do, and we, you try to explain that, but it's hard to really put a finger on because we're probably a little bit of a jack of all trades. You have to have knowledge of nearly everything that comes through the board, but not be an expert on, but be able to guide all the execs in the right way to bring stuff to a board or a board committee, and how they can get those decisions and those business plans or that money that they really want to spend agreed in the correct and compliant way.
So it's like clinical governance where we look at the guidelines made for us and then we have to comply by them. So you guys have like similar.
Yeah, massively, yeah. So there's lots of different frameworks and we have to hold the ring on all those and make sure that we do that. But ultimately, if something goes wrong in the organisation, the first place I look at is towards the board and corporate governance. So we have to make sure that we have all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed. It's checks and balances really constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what really helps us with that is there is a NHS code of governance for foundation trusts like Dudley and also NHS trusts like Sandwell. We operate slightly differently. And coupled with that, we have obviously our main regulator, which is a Care Quality Commission, and they have several domains that they'll look at in terms of safe, effective, and so on, which clinicians will be familiar with. But they also have a domain called well-led, and that makes a direct reference to the effectiveness of the board of directors in setting strategic direction, being responsible for the allocation, use of resources, for the achievement of constitutional and operational targets. It does have an impact on clinical colleagues at the front line when perhaps they're thinking, why am I being asked to do X, Y, or Z? So that's where that's coming from, really. If you look at, I would say, corporate governance, it's part of a wider integrated governance web. Would you describe it as a web?
Yeah.
That, as you've mentioned, you've got procedures, you've got standing operating procedures, you've got policies and so on, and they all set about to determine and direct us as the best way of doing things.
It was complying with the rules.
Yes.
Yeah. And I imagine from, the community's perspective, this just reassures them that all the money that's flowing to their first point of call when they might need help one day, it's been, appropriately distributed where it's needed, where their care can be most prioritized for them. So I can see, and it's massive amounts that we're dealing with here, but I can imagine there's also that challenge of constantly making sure that the feedback from the work that's being done is coming through to inform new governance. So it's like actively working to improve itself from when something is implemented, getting data and feedback from patient care from the front end, and then knowing this is what's worked, this is not working quite so well. Okay, this is what we need to implement for the next time. Is there that kind of communication? Is it happening? Is it effective?
I think we talk about information flow, and from CQC's well-led perspective, they will want to see that there is effective information flow from what they would describe as ward to board. And I think the ability to be a learning organisation is prized, and certainly not just the feedback we're getting from our clinicians at the front line, but also the participation in improvement programmes. I'm thinking of the GIRFT, the Getting It Right First Time programme. I'm thinking about when we have NICE guidelines coming through, they will very much have an impact. And again, it's all around improving outcomes. It's all about reducing variability and also supporting everybody to be safe in the role that they are delivering.
So how many people are usually in this board meeting? Yeah.
So a board of directors and how it's composed, the bones of that are set out in the Code of Governance that I referenced earlier. And we as an organisation, we have a constitution document that deals specifically with the composition of the board. And there are some prescriptive members that you need to have. So you need to have a chief executive, in our case, shared chief exec. Sandwell and Dudley is Diane Wake. And she is a chief accountable officer. So she's responsible for the board. You're also required as a foundation trust, and you can tell me if it's the same in an NHS trust, a registered medical practitioner, a registered nursing practitioner. And I think those are the three main ones that is prescribed. But thereafter, if you're looking at running a multi-million-pound organisation that has specific resource budget allocated, say, for example, workforce, you're definitely going to want a director who's a specialist in people matters. You're also going to want a person who's very specialised in strategic and improvement skills. You're also looking at people who are very good with the money. We're talking about multi-million-pound budgets. So you're talking about a director of finance.
And we've also, we're not a foundation trust at Sandwell. We have an establishment order that comes direct from the Department of Health and the Healthcare. But it's the same set. We have to have a chair of chief executives and the same standing officers. But as Helen said, that then they can board themselves and can shape what the other exec directors are. We have to have a certain number of meds, and at Sandwell we have to have a university represented med. That's within our establishment order. So the board composition is outside of those accountable officers is really up to how the direction the trust want to go to.
Mm.
But obviously, because we're not a foundation trust, we don't have the governor situation that you have here at Dudley. So we don't have a council of governors because we're a traditional trust as it originally was set up.
Mm.
I think in both cases, though, the description of our board is that of a unitary board. So it's made up of executive directors who are responsible for the operational delivery of all the things we've been talking about. And the NEDs that Dan's referenced are non-executive directors, and they're also often termed as independent directors. And their role is much more about holding the executive directors to account for how they're running the trust. But the unitary aspect of it means that the board as a whole is accountable for how they deliver services. Dan's touched on the fact we've got a council of governors. So as a foundation trust, we received that status in 2008. And it was very much a move at the time of ensuring that there was accountability locally. So the governors are drawn from a membership that we have out within our public area and the community we serve. And there's 3 or 4 primary things that governors are responsible for, and one of them is holding the non-executive directors to account for the board's effective running of this organisation. To put that in perspective as well, those non-executive directors are appointed by our governors. So again, you've got that very much public accountability, where if the governor's appointed a non-executive, they're holding them to account for the running of the board. So there's that sort of loop that occurs. And, remembering we are publicly funded, it's in the interests, as, our local communities are one of our key stakeholders. And that, I think, is important for our board from a learning perspective, because they also need to be a listening board. We've very much sought soundings from our governors, from our members, from staff across all cohorts, our medics, our AHPs, our non-clinical staff and so on. So it's important that we listen and learn as a trust as well, and the board, I would say, is absolutely responsible for ensuring that happens.
And when we're looking at a cohort of non-exec directors, they're not usually. You do want a few that are NHS or medicine background, but most of them are cross-section across different organisations or different sectors of industry, really, just so they can bring a different perspective into what would be otherwise quite an NHS background executive team, really. So, and they're only appointed for a certain period of time, just to make sure that they don't get too close to the board and become, I suppose, institutionalised or really.
Yeah, they talk about retaining objectivity, don't they? They need to retain that objectivity, so that they're almost like your critical friend. As an exec director, you'd be looking at them to be the ones who would hold the mirror up and say, as indeed we just had audit committee this morning, and our non-execs have asked some very insightful and searching questions to challenge and probe particular things from perhaps an audit and assurance point of view.
It's one of the key parts of our role is to support those non-exec directors of being introduced and supporting them with their education or their training, just to do that. So it's quite a key part of our role as company secretaries.
That's amazing. So it's like lots of different specialties to pick from when these decisions get made. It means you can hear lots of different perspectives, and everyone brings their own speciality to the table. I think one thing that something like this podcast will be very useful for our staff that might be listening is there might be that little bit of a disconnect between the staff on ground with the patient in front of them, and then all the board meeting and everything that's happening behind the scene to make everything possible, or to make that kind of guides how the department is run, for instance. So I think this is good to know and just reassure the staff that, look, there is a host of team of specialties that is working together in order to meet these national targets, these local targets, and just so the best is created for the local community.
And not just clinical staff, like even like the local community, like if you watch the news, like there's a lot of people going there, where is the money going? Where's my tax money going? Like this is a good thing to like say that actually we're not just throwing it away. You guys, like the board actually has a list of things to do to make sure that money is being used in a useful manner.
And in an accountable way.
Yes.
Of that loop.
It's always important that the board's open and transparent. So when the board meets, it does meet in public. So everyone's encouraged. We would always encourage staff or members of the public to come and attend a public. So it's not a public meeting, but it's a board meeting held in public, so they can view that public meeting. That meeting meet bi-monthly, and I would really encourage people to come and.
See, we didn't even know that.
Yeah, no idea. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, there's an opportunity for them to submit questions into ourselves, and we'll make sure those are heard aboard. As I say, it's not a public meeting, but it's a meeting that's held in public. So, but we absolutely encourage anyone to come to the board meeting.
Are there any particularly exciting projects or key events or projects that the board is looking at the moment that you might want to?
We're drawing a deep breath there. There's some really exciting.
It's been our life for the last few months.
Really, really transformational work, and if you've probably seen us perk up, it's been, I think, yes, really, really hard work, but also it's been really, really motivating. And this stems from, and I think the initiative, we would say the working title is Achieving Synergy. And we look at, the populations and the communities that we serve here in Dudley and on our borders, and particularly on our populated borders to our east, which is West Birmingham. We get a growing percentage of patients coming from there. And of course, we have Sandwell Trust next door. And in January 2025, Diane Wake was appointed as the shared chief executive officer across both trusts. And that really has been the catalyst and set in motion for how we might come together to make better use of resources and create, better outcomes and equity for all the people we serve in that area. There's some benefits of that scale. And where Dan's saying, we've been really, really busy, I think I'll hand over to you because you can perhaps describe some of the bits we've been involved with.
So obviously Samuel been through a couple of really big pieces of transformation piece. We've just opened MUH, and that was nearly 15 years of transformational work, and we got that open, and then the next phase that Sir David was to look at was to bring the two organisations together. So we'll have to reiterate, this isn't a merge. We're looking to move to a group model for working, and especially around the board. So we have over the last, since Diane's come in, really, we've started the work to look at how we can bring our governance together and cut out some duplications and some shared styles of working. And myself and Helen have been working on the spine of a framework that could allow that. So we've had to go away and write quite a number of serious governance documents and get some legal advice, and to a point where this week we both have our board meetings, and we're looking for the board to approve the move to a group model. And I say we've lived every letter of that, really. And we haven't done this in silo. Me and Helen, we sat in a room, we set up a task and finish group. We've taken advice from a lot of people, have a lot of input from everyone. It's been, as Helen said, it's been a bit invigorating, really. It's really...
it's certainly been challenging.
It's been challenging, but it's been a real motivator, and looking forward to Wednesday, hopefully get it signed off.
Yeah, well, Thursday for us, because our board's on the following day.
One of that is that we begin the board meetings to one. So at the moment we meet separately. We'll have one individual board meeting for each trust as a minimum each year that we'll do our accountancy stuff that we need to do for our annual report and accountancy. But other than that, we'll be looking we will be meeting as a group board going forward. But to allow us to do that, we had to set up a a spine of documents that allow us to do.
Wow.
It's like a suite of documents.
Yeah,
I think there's 2 points I want to make here. One is I've felt very strongly that we've been the governance guardians in this regard. And that's God twice, but we've really had to think about, yes, we can come together as a group, but neither of us can ever forget that actually we are two sovereign organisations. We are held to account as individual organisations. So when, NHS at the centre is looking to our performance financially, operationally, whatever target they might be setting is, we are accountable as Dudley, you are accountable as Sandwell. So we have to have that retention of sovereignty, as they call it. And so that's where I think we've each been governance
we do,
guardians in that
yeah.
aspect, but we still had to come together and create a framework that means that we've hopefully got no cracks, but we've done the best we can. And the proof of the pudding, I think, will be in the eating. And I hate to say that. And we've got a review set up in 6 months' time, just so we can look back and say, once we got into practice with this, there's others who've gone before. It's not
Yeah,
like we're
yeah,
pioneering on
we-
this,
we-
but it's obviously particular and
Yeah,
peculiar to us,
we
isn't
went
it?
away and we spoke to a number of organisations who've already done this and tried to take their best practice and take some of the lessons that they had from that. So
Okay.
we went in with our eyes open, and when we do hopefully get it signed off this week, it won't be the end for us, because it's our job then to ensure that the governance that decisions are made at that group board are correctly made at that group board and not. And so to do that, we've had to set up a scheme of delegation, so each board or each sovereign organisation understands that they can take that decision as a group or if not. But that's going to be our job, or our predecessors in the future will it's to make sure that they continue and hold that to account. So it doesn't end with the decision this week, but a lot of work has gone into that.
Oh, wow. It sounds like a lot of work has gone into it.
And also, I think the analogy, when I think about all the different things that will need to be brought together, not just from governors, but we're talking about clinical services plan, how best can we work together? And I've gone away and I thought, actually, it's a bit like fastening up a zip. So every one of those teeth on that zip has another strand or element of something that it may be best for us to do as a group, or it may be best for us to do as a sovereign organisation, because we're each individual organisations. We've each got our own culture. We've each got a slightly different community that we serve. And, there won't be one size fits all for
Yeah.
everything. But that's how we'll need to feel as we go along, sort of
Gosh,
pulling the
yeah.
zip up slowly. That's how I could
The
describe it.
logistics of navigating all of that, because you want to do the best for your local community, but then also there's tremendous things to gain from that synergy, the word that you said, of if there's that cooperation amongst the boards and the local trust, pick out what they do really well that maybe we could improve on, and also there's might be things that we do really well that they can also gain, while also remaining remaining centered to your community that you serve. So yeah, wow, lots of logistical. I can see why there's lots of paperwork and
And-
documentation. Just for our listeners, are there any final thoughts or final things that you'd like to get across to our listeners? We'll have staff members listening or members of the public. Any final thoughts that you would like to pass?
We're always contactable, aren't we, as companies? I'm always happy to come in or have a discussion with someone who's very understanding, or they want to understand what governance means. I've got an open door policy, really. So, obviously I'm at Samwell, but my contact details are always on the public website or on our trust intranet, and I absolutely encourage people to come and have a conversation if they want to, and if they want to know a bit more about the new move to group, then I'll be more than happy to come and talk to any other forums if that's what they would like.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's all good. Yeah, I think my message to anybody working in either of our trusts is that this board of directors is not an entity that's just ethereal, and it's integrated. It's fully conversant with every single thing that's going on in the trust, listening to what we can learn from our staff, from our stakeholders, from our patients. And I think the accessibility thing that you talk about is really, really spot on, because unless we have that transparency and openness and communication, then I think we are making it them and us, and it really, really isn't. It really is not them and us. We've all got the same goals. We all want to achieve and be the best we can be for our patients and our staff and the wider community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on to
us.
the Right Chamber podcast. It's been so amazing learning about everything we've talked about, and I can't wait to actually turn up to one of these board meetings because I'm so curious. As you said, it is not about them and us. We all have that joint goal of our patients at the forefront, our local community, and our staff as well. So amazing work, and just big congratulations, and hopefully all goes well with meeting as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.
And to our listeners as well, thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you would like to take part or join us in any future episodes, feel free to contact us. And also, from everything we've discussed in today's podcast, we'll try to put some important links and contact details of some of the things that are going to be going on. Brilliant. Till the next one. Remember to stay connected with us on social media. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at RGUCMS, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, RGUC Media, for more exclusive content and updates. Thanks for tuning in to the Right Chamber podcast. Until next time.